Bye. Hello? Sister Andrea? Hello?
Hello.
Okay, hi, good morning, or I'm used to saying good morning. How's everybody?
All is well.
Amen. So Andrea,
You faded out, Dr. Fane.
I shall return. Andrea, Sister Andrea.
Yes.
Okay, you got it.
I disabled the waiting room so people can come straight in.
Okay.
Go get my bags from out
I'll be right back.
They in the back seat. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, Sister Micah.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you just kind of, I'm going to finish getting this stuff together. Can you just kind of greet people as they come in and just let them know we're going to be starting at 7 o'clock sharp?
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate it.
I'm good. Okay. Here, Daniel, if somebody hey, praise the Lord. If somebody get on there, say praise the Lord.
How will I know? Hey, baby. How you doing? Can't believe I could put on duty for this crap.
If I lose, I'll take 500 laps around the lake village. My hands, too.
He acts like a 7-year-old.
Hello, praise the Lord. I heard something.
Hi, Daniel.
Nothing.
Hi, Miss Andrea. Praise the Lord. Mom, Miss Andrea just got him.
Okay. Did you say hi?
Yeah. I said praise the Lord. And
Okay.
I said he's the perfect greeter.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he wanted to do it.
that's the one he counted.
Oh.
Now that's an excellent question, Lee. I've got to hand it to you, son. You always get right to the point. Okay, I'll tell you.
Come on, Daniel, so you can greet people.
Greet people where?
Yeah, on here. Because I got to wash my hands.
Listen, Lee. The point of all these rules is to stack the deck against yourself. Each and every time you set your sights on a new objective. It's about giving yourself an option.
You don't waste the best over.
Instead of seeing it as
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
I chained myself to those 500 laps. I forced myself to take some.
Praise the Lord.
Rock, paper, scissors with an almost deadly serious. I still have put in several hundred laps around the village. If you want to toughen up, it's the ultimate two-step program.
Nobody else.
There go Brother Mark. Oh no, that's Brother Park.
Brother, I thought she was about to say part.
How you doing?
Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
How y'all doing?
I'm about to do it in my mom's voice. Praise the Lord. It's your voice. Praise the Lord.
No, me too.
That voice was more like praise the Lord. Sean gonna make his voice sound off like this. Praise the Lord. Hello?
Hello.
Hi. Who is this again?
This is Mr. This is Brother Parker.
Hi, Brother Parker.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm not really. I'm just in my living room watching something.
Since the day I met you, my window has been betrayed.
Hey, I see Miss Andrea in the church camera.
All right, here, I'll take over the greetings.
Hmm.
You go clean up your mess, please.
Oh, I don't really want.
Okay, well, you need to clean up your mess, and then once you clean up your mess, you can greet. There's a fruit snack paper there under the chair. All right. Did you get it?
Yeah. Hey, Brother Parker. I had to clean up the mess. My mom called me Flippy Flipster because I flip a lot. Apparently. I don't even know. It's the Bible. What? Steady. Brother Parker?
Yes, how are you?
Hi.
Oh, Lord.
Why can we see
Lord.
almost everything? Hey, that's Godmom and Goddad's house.
It is.
Yeah, I recognize the picture.
Yes, it is.
I thought the phone was frozen for a second because nothing was really moving.
Everybody got their own house. You can see the church.
We can almost see everything. We see Godmom and Goddad's house. What was his name again?
And Miss Andrea, and his name is Brother Park.
Yeah, Brother Parker's house also.
Uh,
That's just other phones on this.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were probably cameras that's in the church.
That is that's the church right there.
Oh.
The bishop on preaching.
Well,
They're gonna teach Bible study.
so we're using phones to listen?
Yeah, we can't go to church right now.
Why is that Godmom or Goddad showing up?
She said she'll be right back.
I guess she went shopping safe.
She did not.
Or Dollar Tree. Get a Dollar Tree because everything should be $1. Family Dollar. If we bring our whole entire family, we can get
Praise the Lord, Elder Gardner.
Praise the Lord. You don't have your video on.
I don't.
Well, at least I don't see you.
Probably have to scroll over to see me.
Oh, okay.
Maybe I don't have it on. Now I do.
We are going to continue our study in eschatology, the study of last things. And tonight we're doing lesson number 5, which we have been studying on the rapture of the church. And we have studied the rapture of the church as far as the New Testament scriptures for the rapture of the church in 1 Corinthians, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 through 18. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 51 through 54. And we talked about the rapture from that standpoint. And then in our last lesson, we talked about the rapture in the light of Matthew 24, chapter 24. And we proved in that lesson that Matthew 24 is not dealing with the rapture of the church. Matthew 24 is a message, what we call the Olivet Discourse, where Jesus was talking to the Jews and letting them know all of the events of the end times that they were going to be as a Jewish people involved in. And so we did verse 14 down through verse number 30 in those lessons, in that last lesson. And now we're at verse 34 through 51. And what we're going to show is we want to talk about the rapture of the church in the light of Noah's ark and the flood. Is Jesus talking about the rapture of the church pertaining to the flood of Noah being a warning or an example of the rapture, or is he talking about something else? We think he's talking about something else. He's not talking about the rapture here because he's still talking to that same Jewish group that had no idea about the rapture. Paul said, I show you a mystery when he talked about the rapture in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse number 51. The rapture was a mystery to the Jewish people and to the Old Testament church and to that Jewish group that Jesus spoke. So Jesus is not talking about the rapture when he was talking about Noah there, but he actually was talking about the second coming of Christ. In this lesson, we study the second coming of Christ as discussed by Jesus in Matthew 24, 34 through 52, in light of the flood of Noah's day. To note the things Jesus said about the flood that give insight into what the second coming of Christ will be like for the Jews. And so that was his discussion. Our hermeneutics and purpose is to show that Matthew 24 is not about the rapture, but it is a special warning to the Jews who will be on the earth during the tribulation period. The events of Matthew 24 will happen after the church has already been raptured out. And so the assignment for the class is we're supposed to read Matthew 24, 34 through 51. Then we're supposed to read the lesson notes. Then we're to watch this video, then listen to the class presentation by Dr. Brown, that's myself, when I would go live and do the discussion, then answer the study questions in preparation for the class. Then we're to score our work. Suggestions. I suggest that those of you who are in the class, you would study a form of Zoom study group that would help you with your lessons. I've always found the study groups to be very helpful. The objective is to show that the teachings of Jesus in Matthew 24, 34 through 51 were pertaining to the second coming of Christ and were a warning to the Jews to stay alert and not be deceived by the Antichrist and the false prophet in the tribulation period. So he's trying to warn the Jews. And so that's the reason why he would say things like, you know not the day nor the hour when the Son of Man comes, so that those Jews will not think that they can stray away, go away, and then come back just in time because they know he's coming tomorrow. No, you don't know the day nor the hour. And so what you need to do is you need to stay on course, is what Jesus was saying to them by saying that. And so he said, as there was only a small remnant, there's one point being made by Jesus in his teachings relative to Noah's ark, as there was only a small remnant saved in Noah's day, a small number that escaped the fire and brimstone of the days of Abraham from Sodom and Gomorrah, so shall there be only a remnant saved at the second coming of Christ. On the day of the Lord, all of the wicked, including many unfaithful Jews, will be destroyed. Many will be called, but many are called, but few are chosen. In Matthew 24:34, Jesus assures the Jews that the events of their end time will happen in such a short period of time that even the old men of that generation will have the probability of living long enough to see it all come to pass. It will happen within a short span of time, within a 7-year period. The things and the events of the tribulation period that Jesus is talking about here. All right. The key to understanding what Jesus meant by the generation is to understand the context of the passage. So what Jesus was saying there, and that's the verse that we started at. What Jesus was saying there was that we started. Yes. Okay. What Jesus was saying was that this generation will not pass away. So he was talking about the generation of Jews that would be in the world when the tribulation, the events of the tribulation period would take place. And that was what he was talking about, because Jesus lived on the end of the Jewish time, and then there's 7 more years of Jewish history that has to be fulfilled after Christ. But between the time when Jesus died and now is about 2,000 years. So that 2,000 year span between then and now is the church age. So this really is not the generation that he was talking about. What happened after AD 33 is not what he's talking about. He's not talking about that. He's talking about the last 7 years of Jewish history, which picks up after the rapture of the church. And we'll be explaining that further when we study Daniel's 70th week. And so what Jesus is, what Jesus, that's what Jesus was saying when he said this generation shall not pass away. Okay, when Jesus talks about the events of Noah's day, what he is actually doing here, he's actually comparing what happened to the people in Noah's day to what will happen to the people at the second coming of Christ. He says here in verse number 34, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And so, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. What is he saying here? He's saying here that at the second coming of Christ, all of those who are on the earth, all of those Jews that are there, who are not paying attention to the law of God, who are not paying attention and who've forgotten that the Lord is coming back, all those Jews who have forgotten to look for the Lord, all those who will abandon the Lord, and there'll be a great falling away of Jews, all of those who forsake the law, all of those who choose not to be in the righteous remnant. There will be a righteous remnant there also, a righteous remnant that will be saved. They will have to go into hiding because of the great tribulation, but there'll be a righteous remnant, but there'll be a number of them that will fall away because, as we've read in the last lesson, the false Christ and the false prophets will rise and tell them that you ought to follow us, and they're going to deceive a lot of them. So what Jesus is saying here is that get ready for the same kind of outcome that there was with Noah's Ark, because in Noah's Ark, only 8 souls were saved. Then at Sodom and Gomorrah, only a few souls were saved. Most of the bulk of the people were destroyed at Noah's Ark and in the Sodom and Gomorrah situation. The bulk of the population were destroyed. And so, sadly, this is exactly what's going to happen at the second coming of Christ. The majority of the population will be destroyed. By the time that the second coming of Christ occurs, almost 80 or 90% of the world's population will have been destroyed, maybe through nuclear wars or something of that nature, something horrible in the tribulation period. And so Jesus is trying to alert them and tell them that it looked like it's going to go the same way, because there are too many Jews that don't believe. And there's too many ungodly people in the world that don't believe. So he says, when the Lord comes, there's one point that we need to bring out here, and that is that when the Lord comes, he is going to, first of all, he's going to take out the the wicked out. All right. In verse number 40 of Matthew 24, then shall two be in the field, and one shall be taken, and the other one left. What does he mean by that? He said, two women shall be grinding at the mill. The one shall be taken, and the other one left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord comes. Now, what Jesus is talking about here is that when it comes to the flood of Noah, when it came to the flood of Noah, what happened was the wicked were swept away in the flood. And that sweeping away in the flood is equivalent to the word taken here. They were took away in the flood, and Noah was left. And so Noah and his family was left. And that's the same way it's going to be in the second coming of Christ. The wicked are going to be swept away in judgment, according to Revelation 19, where and also in Matthew 24, and I believe around about the 16th verse or somewhere in there, where it says where the carcasses are. It says in verse number 28, for wherever the carcass is, there will be the eagles gathered together. What does that mean? That means that when the Lord comes with his judgment, there's going to be such a massive destruction of the wicked that the vultures will be having a good meal. So he invites, in that same scenario, if you go to Revelation 19 that describes this, around verse number 17, the angel invites all of the vultures and the birds to come and eat the flesh of kings and priests and all of the people in the world, because the majority of the world's population will die in the tribulation period. And so Jesus here is comparing the tribulation period judgment to the Noah's Ark and the flood, and how the majority of the world population died in the flood. And that's the reason why he talks about there's a difference between the rapture and the second coming of Christ. At the rapture, relative to verse number 40, where he says one will be taken and one will be left. At the rapture, the righteous were taken out, and the world was left in the hands of the devil in the tribulation period. And the righteous had to be taken out to avoid the horrors of the tribulation period and the wicked things that would be going on. So the righteous were taken out, and they went to glory. But the second coming of Christ is different from that, in that the wicked will be taken out. Now, one of the reasons why the wicked will be taken out is because right after the second coming of Christ, right after he judges the world, then the millennial begins. And the remnant that will be preserved and left, and not taken out, but left, are those who are going to go into the new millennial kingdom, where those who come up in the first resurrection will go. That's going to happen also at the second coming of Christ. Those Old Testament saints and any righteous people that are on the earth will go into the millennial kingdom. Now, the church doesn't go there because the church is raptured out. And the church's blessings are on a different schedule than the schedule of the Jews. The Jewish schedule is the blessings of the earth, inheriting the earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. That's the Jewish blessing. The promises of Abraham for a land flowing with milk and honey. The Davidic promise of a kingdom that God was going to give, an everlasting kingdom. And this promise and this talk about this kingdom will come to pass. Even Job said, I know that my Lord will stand upon the earth. It was in him, this hope of this millennial reign. So the reason why the wicked are taken out is because this time, different from the rapture, when the world will be left to the devil to run for 7 years in the tribulation period, this time the world will be left to Messiah, King Jesus, and the wicked have to get out the way so that they can set the kingdom up and so that they can go into the kingdom. So when he says that one will be taken and the other one left, the one that's taken is the wicked one who's taken to judgment, who's going out and is going to be destroyed. He's going to take them out of the world. All right. So, and then reading now down in verse number 42, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord comes. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in which, in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh. In other words, the coming of the Lord. And he talks about being this thief in the night. And he used this analogy, thief. Well, if he's coming and he's going to take, if you're not saved, you don't belong to him. He's not. He don't have to steal you. You, if you're saved, he just take you, but he'll steal what doesn't belong to him. If you don't belong to him, he's going to take you out. And in that day, now the churches will already be raptured out of here, but those Jews in that day who don't belong to him, he's going to take them out first. And it's going to be a great slaughter of the Jews. And he says here, and therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh. Who then is faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. The Jews are going to be judged upon this. Not only the Jews, but those proselytes, those who join in with the Jews, they're going to be judged on this. And they'll whether or not they go into the kingdom and receive the joy of the Lord or not. All right, and verse number 47, verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. In other words, those Jews that are faithful are going to inherit that kingdom, and they're going to be places of rulership and a reward for them. But if that evil servant shall say in his heart, my Lord delayeth his coming, if you're fooling around as a Jew, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with drunkards, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him, cut him asunder, cut him out. See, the wicked come out. Cut him asunder and appoint him a portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Weeping and gnashing of teeth has to do with being put out. Has to do with being put out and being on the outside when you should be on the inside. There will be a great slaughter of the wicked, where the vultures are invited to a meal from all of the dead bodies that are destroyed in judgment of God by whatsoever means, whether it be natural disasters or when the world of the wicked are destroyed in the battle of Armageddon. He sends his angels to take them, the wicked, out and destroy them. Either way, the day of the Lord's wrath, it will be just like in the days of Noah, because there'll just be a remnant saved. The Jews will be having to run and hide. Many of them are going to stray away. So there'll just be a remnant of the Jews saved. Now, Should that remnant that remnant philosophy come over to the church? I would say not. I don't think the Lord was talking about a small group. Many called, a few are chosen. When he's talking to the church, he was talking to the Jews. And one thing we have to learn is that when Jesus is speaking to the Jews and not speaking to the church, we have to understand that, because God has an agenda for the Jews, and he has an agenda for the church. So the many are called, a few are chosen, or the remnant, that doesn't apply to the church. Many people be saved in the church. And so you don't have to say just a few going to go to heaven. No, that's not what point he's making. He's talking about the Jews and the remnant that the Jews will have for salvation. Well, God bless you, and we will continue our study in eschatology, the study of the end times. And coming up, possibly in the next lesson, will be the study of Daniel's 70th week. God bless you and keep you. We have a few questions that we're going to answer here tonight. And so we'll stop and receive the questions that we'll answer. But God bless you and thank you for listening.
Can I ask you a question about the parable?
Christ. And it is very, very, very important for us to understand that. I need to warn you about something. I've been talking about it. I've been talking about it in the various classes, but I really need to give a real good warning about it. There's a thing out called replacement theology. And replacement theology, I think that all pastors and all theologians, all who will be teaching on the end time, especially, and not only just on the end time, but it's in almost all of the topics in the Bible. We need to get an understanding of what replacement theology is. We need to understand what it is. Now I'm telling you what it is. We need to study it. We need to know it. We need to be able to catch it when we see it. What replacement theology is, what happened was during the first and second century of the church, there was a great rivalry, political and almost at the point of war, between the Jews and the quote Christians. Now, the ones who were really doing this, they weren't Christians. I'm gonna tell you right now. I know a lot of them have had time to read and look at the lives of a lot of these people, but I have read a lot about people like St. Augustine, St. Organ, and Tertullian, and Christensen, that great man. A lot of them, in fact, almost all of them. If you go back and check the theology of the first and second century quote church fathers, and you read all of their statements about the Jews, you will find hatred, such deep and gross hatred of the Jews. And because they hated the Jews so bad, they could not stand to see any passage that says that, like millennial passages where it says that Christ is going to reign with the Jews. They couldn't stand it. They were almost as anti-Semitic as Adolf Hitler. In fact, Adolf Hitler indirectly got his fuel from them because Augustine, who actually came in the 5th century, he was a real strong leader in anti-Semitism. He fed Martin Luther. Martin Luther was an Augustinian monk. And he fed anti-Semitism to Martin Luther such that Martin Luther infiltrated Germany to the point where Adolf Hitler picked up on it and he marched based on with the flame of those church fathers, quote church fathers. And so, so what does anti-Semitism have to do with what I'm going to say? What I'm getting ready to say is that anti-Semitism, what happened was Jerusalem was burned by the Romans in AD 70. And there was such a horrible burning. It was such a horrible thing that they counted that as God condemning the Jews forever, saying that the Jews God was through with the Jews. And they were very eager to go with that opinion. God's finished with the Jews. God's finished with the Jews. We don't have to deal with the Jews anymore. In fact, they were so eager with it that what they did was, because they were the ones that were in power, none of them were really saved. They were actually Gnostics, philosophers, and really real spiritual criminals. They were actually those that Jesus said Jerusalem should be tracked down like the Gentiles at the time the Gentiles be fulfilled. They were the ones who trodden it down in theology. And so they thought that it was God must be on our side. We hate the Jews, but I do want to encourage every pastor, everybody who's teaching on the end time, to take up time and research and look at anti-Semitism and the church fathers and read all of those statements, and then you'll see why it is that the hatred was so deep. So when Jerusalem was burned in AD 70, they said, that must be God. Yeah, God made the Jews look just like us. And so then what they said was that apparently every promise the Jews had in the Bible now belonged to the Christians. And they belong to the church. The Jews are out, the Jews are through. And with that attitude, then they wrote a whole new theology, a perspective of theology, a whole new system. And the system included, or what it did was, it eliminated the Jews from any passage in the Bible that was talking about the Jews. And made those passages, twisted them. They did what you call allegorical interpretations. Allegorical interpretation, they don't go according to context. They go according to whatever you think it's going to say. And they did what you call, quote, spiritualize a lot of ideas and a lot of things in the Bible. Anything to get away from giving recognition to the Jews, for God shall even care for the Jews. And so they wrote this new theology. And in this new theology, all of the scriptures were interpreted in the light or from the perspective of the Jews being replaced by the Christians, and God had nothing to say to the Jews. All of the promises that God made to them about the Messianic kingdom, all of that was wiped away. Basically, they call it anti-Semitism. And from this, you get these mixed up doctrines. And that's the reason why Matthew 24 is read by most of us in society as if it's talking to the church about the rapture, when it has nothing to do with the rapture. It is talking about the Jews and their coming future, the finishing of their history, and it's talking about the Jews only. In fact, in that audience, there was only Jews, and Jesus only spoke to Jews, and he was speaking to the Jews pertaining to their future. And so, but what happens in the place of theology is, it says that's to the church. So then that makes people go out and say, now that's about the rapture, and then you start getting everything all mixed up, because they do not know the proper audience that the passage is written to. And so, and that's the case, it is imperative. I believe it's necessary to stop to say this. It is absolutely imperative that if you want to get understanding of the end time, all the passages in the Bible pertaining to the end times, you will not be able to do it if you do not understand what promises that God had for the Jews. And if you don't understand those, then you won't be able to understand Revelation. And you'll be reading commentary on top of commentary, statements on top of statements from people on the internet, and all of them are confused because of what we call replacement theology. Replacement theology is dominant. It came about from Augustine out of the Catholic Church, the Reformers got in the background, and all of us actually have been affected by it. Our theological bases have been affected by replacement theology. Many scriptures are misinterpreted because of replacement theology. So I said that because it's very important. And when you go through, you will not be able to go through a study of the end time, study the time of rapture, study the time of the tribulation period, mid-tribulation, post-tribulation, raptures, and all of that, pre-trib, premillennialism, all you will not be able to understand. You'll be confused as everybody else if you do not begin to notice where replacement theology has put its fingers in. And when people are involved or have replacement theology, or going back on replacement theology, that's when you're going to get arguments from them as to, for example, when Paul says, the Lord himself shall send from heaven with a shout, the voice of the archangel, the trumpet of God, and the dead Christ shall rise first. If you don't understand that in Revelation chapter 11, verse 15, when it talks about the seventh trumpet, if you don't know that that trumpet is really to Israel, and only to Israel, then you can be confused by those who say that trumpet, the rapture is a trumpet that sounds at the end and the second coming of Christ. And actually, they can almost convince you that the rapture takes place at the second coming of Christ. Because you have not been able to differentiate in your mind or your studies the difference between what is really said about Revelation 11:15 pertaining to the seventh trumpet. If you don't know that that seventh trumpet is the promise of God, that Christ, the messianic promise of God, where Christ rules the earth, if you don't know about that, if you don't know where it was said from Isaiah, where Zechariah said it, you don't know that, you don't know what Daniel said to anoint the Most High, that's the anointing of the Most High in Jewish prophecy, when the Lord comes back. If you don't know that, if you don't know that those are all lined up and those are promises to the Jews, exclusion, they're not to the Gentiles, the church. If you don't know that, then you'll be confused like the rest of them saying, oh, well, that trumpet must be the trumpet that's on the end, and then, now that must be the end time. That must be the trumpet of the rapture is the trumpet, the seventh trumpet. If you don't know, you'll get caught up in it. But that seventh trumpet is actually, when it says, is actually the Lord, when the Lord sets up his kingdom, and it says that when he says that he's made the governor of the earth, of all the earth and everything like that. And if you don't know, you'll get tricked. But a lot of times we don't know because of replacement theology. Now, what has replacement theology done? Let me read the scripture here. Revelation chapter 11, verse number, verse number 15. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdom of our Lord. If you don't know about the messianic promise, if you don't know that this is just the messianic promise, and that this is Abrahamic promise of the Davidic covenant, where David was promised the throne, and that Jesus Christ is going to come down from his loins, he's going to come eventually as the Messiah out from him. If you don't know that, then you'll be thinking this is the rapture. The seventh trumpet, the reason why they try to claim the seventh trumpet is rapture is so that they can try to force you to believe that the rapture takes place at the second coming of Christ. And this has nothing to do with the rapture. Now, what you have to do, so what I'm saying is, in all my studies, I'm running into people who are confused, and they're confused basically because they don't know that Jesus, when Jesus is talking to the Jews, in fact, this may come as a little painful pill to you. In fact, Jesus left everything pertaining to the church pretty much to the apostles. When Jesus was talking when he talked about the wheat and tares, he wasn't going to talk about church people. Well, that's what replacement theology does. He's talking about church people. Some people who Christian church, and some people, that's replacement theology for them. It takes texts that really were into the Jews and put them in a quote out of context Christian concept, using what we call allegorical theology. And so the parable of the wheat and tare, what he's talking about there is he's talking about that judgment day, the second coming of Christ, when those Jews that are mixed together, he's going to separate them out. But if you notice in the passage, that's in the 13th chapter of the book of Matthew. 13:24. You want to read it?
30.
Yes, go ahead.
No.
13 through 24. Another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while he slept, the enemy came in, and when he goes down, you can read it, it's just there. He took the wheat, the tares out first. I want to bring that statement up first to explain what we taught tonight, how the wheat comes out first. And that's at that time. Okay? So I really encourage you to study it. And another thing I need to warn you about, I mean, I was warning people about this last week and this week, and I said, maybe that's too much. Maybe I should just put what you people's mind, they don't hear all that. But I got to warn you because from replacement theology, a thing called preterism came. Preterism is the teaching that everything was done at 80, 70, and there's no future prophecies to be fulfilled. And I'm going to put a lesson online and show you all of the points that show that preterism is a lie. First of all, how can John be talking about what happened in 80, 70 and talking about the future if that future that he was talking about happened when he wrote somewhere around 80, 90, between 80, 90 and 8100. But what happened in 80, 70 was 30 years before he was written. So how well is going to be true? We'll just bring out points like that. Now let me just stop just for a minute and just find out, are there any questions?
Do you have questions, Andrew? Huh?
Okay, no questions? Okay, I'll proceed on. Preterism, I'll tell you what that is. Preterism, like I said, is the teaching that came out of replacement theology and out of the anti-Semitism from AD 70, where they say, now, I want to tell you that all of this is based on Satan's, now remember now, according to what we know all about the Bible, but according to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse number 7 through 9, the Antichrist operates by the workings of Satan. So what Satan hates the Jews. And then if you go to Revelation chapter 12, and it talks about that woman who had to be hid because Satan would be so powerful in the Antichrist that woman had to be hid away. And somebody asked the class last week, why are the children of Israel so hated? They're hated because Satan hates them. And Satan, at the Battle of Armageddon, is going to gather all the nations of the world around Jerusalem. He's going to try to close them in. But that's when the Lord will come and burn them up. He's together. So it is Satan's work. So why is replacement theology and why is anti-Semitism so powerful in the world? Well, it's by the working of Satan. And Satan does not want to see the Jews. They can't stand it. Augustine couldn't stand it. You say the Jews are going to be reigning with Christ in the millennium, or they're going to be kings and priests. They couldn't stand it. Just like Adolf Hitler couldn't stand it. Just like some of the Muslims can't stand it today. Just like some black folks and some other Gentiles can't stand it here. Hate the Jews. So a lot of people hate the Jews. And it's because the Jews are God's chosen people. Somebody probably throw blood on my car when we say it. They are God's chosen people, and they have been promised the millennial kingdom, and God has chosen them. And that's the story behind that too. Why he chose them as a promise of people, not because they were so good, because those are the ones he chose. So the point I'm trying to make is pertaining to this preterism. The preterism is teaching that everything that was promised to the Jews was already fulfilled in all the punishments that they had to go through and everything, was all fulfilled in AD 70. And when you're reading your theology lessons and you're looking there, you see some mentions of AD 70, you know, the notes and stuff like that. Well, that's what AD 70 is about, okay? So, what the predators, in fact, like I said, I was talking on this last week, and when I was talking on it, I had a predators was on the Facebook line, typing in things that I had said, and they were typing in stuff, and right after they was typing in, I was actually preaching a sermon. I had no control. I couldn't get to it, respond back. Everything I was saying in that sermon was called knocking down right after. And I think it is worth it. I really think it's worth it for pastors to know this stuff. It's really worth it, because without this information, and without being able to defend the doctrine against predators, and without being able to differentiate and find out when you're under replacement theology, you will not be able to pull all this together. I'm finding out that one of the determining factors for understanding the revelation is to understand that these things basically what you're reading from the Old Testament, Zechariah, Isaiah, all those places, and even what Jesus said was really to the Jews. It was to the Jews directly. Now, we can use Matthew 24 as an indicator of the coming of the Lord, because we see the things that are coming forth that are going to happen in the tribulation period, then we know that the rapture is getting ready to take place. So we can use it as an indicator of that. But those things that Jesus talked about, you'll find all of those kind of like out in the chapters of the book of Revelation. The chapters of the book of Revelation that are spread out like that. Now, another thing I want to say and share with you, I don't know if I can emphasize that point of trying to understand when you read these passages that a lot of this is to the Jews. Now, maybe I can just give you one reason. There's a number of reasons. One of the reasons is if you study Daniel chapter 9 and verse number 24 to 27, Daniel, Gabriel the angel, sums it up right there. He explains what this 7-year tribulation period is for. He explains it, and that's basically it. And what you'll find, as you go through the scriptures, you'll find all the prophets saying the same thing. All the prophets are saying the same thing about it. And so that's something that you find when you read these prophecies pertaining to the end times. They're all saying basically the same thing. Daniel 9:24. Daniel 9:24 says, 70 weeks. Well, I'll go to 23. At the beginning of thy supplication and the commandment came forth. The commandment came forth. And when you first start praying, God had given me the answer. And I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. Now, what exactly happened here? Daniel was praying about the Jews and the Holy City. How long they were going to be in the Babylonian captivity, and how long they were going to be under captivity altogether before they go here and be forgiven of what they did wrong and seal up what they did wrong. And so the Gabriel tells him, he says in verse number 24, here's how long you got. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, the iniquity of the Jews. It's not the church. And to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. That is your Messiah right there. 7 weeks, and this is what it's going to accomplish. It didn't say anything about a rapture of the church. It says it, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's 7 plus 62, 62, 62. 7 plus 62 comes out to 69. And the streets shall be built again, and the walls even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. Here, Messiah, that's Jesus. And he, after his death, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Now, here it's talking about 69 weeks. 69 weeks was, there were 69 weeks. I'll take my word for it because Gabriel said it. Okay. 69 weeks until when Christ was crucified. That ended the 69th week. So, but how many weeks did Gabriel tell me he had? How many weeks did he say he had? 7. It's 7. So 69 were completed at Calvary. So right now, they got 1 more week to go. Right? 1 more week to go. But there is a gap in between. This is what we call the gap theory of the church. It's really not a gap theory, it's a fact. But there's a gap between the 69th and the 70th week. So in other words, this gap lasts as long as the church age is here. Been here 2,000 years now. That's how long the gap is going to last. So when the church is raptured out, they fulfill that last week. Now, one thing you have to know is that the weeks here are talking about 7-year periods. 7-year periods. So from the going forth of from the start time, if you describe the start time, you can read that. From the start time up to Christ is 400, and it's about 400 and probably 40, 400 and it's 490. So this would be 400 and take 7 away from 90, and that'd be what it was up to Christ. 463, 63 or 483. Yeah, 483, something like that. But anyway, that's how many years that was. But anyway, it's 7 weeks on the end of that. All right? 7 weeks. And the 7 weeks is the tribulation period. And the Jews have to go through that. Daniel tells us that that's what it's continuing. Jesus tells us that's what it's continuing. And that's why we have this. This is one of the reasons why we believe that the tribulation period comes after the rapture, and it lasts for 7 years. Just a little bit here before we close tonight. Even when you're reading about the rapture, you're reading about the tribulation period, the man of sin in the New Testament Bible. I'll start this conversation, and there's a paper coming out because you probably want to hear more when I tell you this a little bit. The way they saw the rapture of the church in the first century church, they saw it as happening tomorrow, like tomorrow after the ascension. And before they really learned what it meant, what the last days really meant, and then before they learned it, they thought like it was going to be happening tomorrow. And every part of it was going to be happening tomorrow. And so, by them having this thought, and even the apostles preached it as if it was happening tomorrow, because they were in their generation, when Jesus ascended on high, they thought that he couldn't come back that next weekend to get there. So that's the way they preached it. And when they preached it, they taught and preached it in a group of as if it was a whole pack. In other words, the rapture, tribulation period, or the man of sin, and all of that happened all in a few years. And so that's the reason why when you read St. Paul, you read him in Second Thessalonians chapter 2, 7 and 9, he talks about the man of sin, he talks about whole ball of wax. Because their perception of it, they think just like it could be next week, so all of this is going to be happening. And so that's why you see a lot of the clusters writing about all of the events happening at once, and why those saints were so upset in Thessalonians, and because they had been told, they thought that the Lord was coming back, some of the saints were down off, and they thought, wow, wait a minute, what happened? We began. I mean, is the Lord going to come? What's going to happen to our relatives? And so they asked, and somebody sent a letter out in Thessalonica saying that the tribulation period was going on and all that. So Paul, that's why he written to them and told them that, that's got to be a falling away first. There's got a lot of stuff got to happen before the Antichrist takes over and you're not in the tribulation period. Then he explained to them that you're not going to have to go through that. Then he explained to them, told them about the rapture. Because they thought they had it all. But since then and up to now, we have separated it all out a little bit more. So we just think individually about the rapture, we talk about it, and then we talk about the tribulation period, the man of sin, and then we are more patient in looking at it. But Peter tried to help them out when, Second Peter, when he tell them that they were, someone was scoffing and saying, well, the Lord is not coming, and he's delaying his coming, and Peter explained to them why. And explained to them what the day of the Lord was, and what the last days mean. So that's going to be coming up in the lesson. We're going to really break that down. So we thank the Lord for everybody who listened tonight. We hope that you listen again, and you will be able to. Let me go over these. No questions from the questions from me right now, right? Okay.
I have one, but I'll ask it after.
Say it again.
I have one, but I'll ask it after.
Okay. Let me go with questions. We'll close out with questions. Okay. Answer the following study questions. Number one, in comparing the flood of Noah's day to the second coming of Christ, what things were alike such that Jesus used the flood of Noah as a model of the way things will go at the second coming of Christ? A, only a few will be saved. B, they all end up happy ever after. And C, the whole world will be saved. And that's mostly A, only a few will be saved. Number two, Noah's flood in Noah's flood, only a small remnant was saved. True. Number three, the days in Noah's day, the people ignored Noah's warnings of the judgment. True. Number four, in Noah's day, almost all of the world's population was killed. True. Number five, Matthew 24, Jesus is comparing the flood of Noah's day to A, the rapture of the church, B, the second coming of Christ. B. Number six, in Noah's day, the flood came and swept them all away, such that when it was over, only Noah's family was left. True, false, true. In number seven, in Noah's case, the wicked were taken, swept away, and the righteous were left. True or false? True. Number eight, like in the case of the flood, the wicked will be taken out at the separation of the wicked unto judgment. This is what is meant in verse 40 to 41. The wicked will be taken and the righteous left on the earth. True or false?
Like in the case of the flood?
Yes, like the case of the flood.
Yes,
true. Yeah. Number 9. The separation of the wheat and the tare is referring to the same thing that Jesus is saying in verses 40 through 41, Matthew 13 through 24, and 30. That answer that one's true. Number 10, the parable of the wheat and the tare in Matthew 13:30. The tares were taken out first, just as it is in Matthew 24:40 through 41, where the wicked are taken out first and the righteous are left to possess the kingdom and enter into the joy of the Lord. That would be true. Number 11, in Matthew chapter 13, Matthew chapter 13, 24 through 30, and Matthew 24, 40 through 41, are speaking a message about the separation of the righteous and the wicked at the second coming of Christ. Answer is true. Number 12, the Lord warns the Jews to not forsake their expectation, because many will fall away and perish in the judgment. That's true. Number 13, he warns that they do not become discouraged and abandon their hope, because the Lord is coming and they will lose out if they fall away, as many will do. That's true. Number 14, many Jews will be deceived and follow the false prophet and the beast and will end up in outer darkness. True or false? That is true. Outer darkness is being cast out. That's even like in the parable Jesus told about the man who came with the wedding garment, wedding without the proper garment on. He was thrown out into outer darkness. That has something to do with Jews who had missed out. And that's what he's talking about there, the outer darkness there. It's actually talking about being put outside of where you should have been. That's outer darkness. In the wheat and the tare parable, those who are hypocrites, who are not sincere Jews, will be thrown out and die in the slaughter of the wicked. But there will be a remnant left. The wheat, true or false? That's true. Number 16. What generation was Jesus referring to when he said that this generation shall not pass away? That should be in Matthew 24, 34. The generation he's talking about was the generation of the tribulation period. Oh, it has three answers to that question down here. A, those who lived in 1833. B, the church age. C, the Jews who will be living in the 7-year tribulation period. The answer is C. Okay, we got one more. So that the Jews would not lose sight on the, that should be lose, it says lose there, but it shouldn't be. Lose sight on the coming of the Lord and fall away. Jesus told them that they could not let down their guards, because no one knows the day and hour of the Lord's return. In other words, stay faithful. True or false? True. All right? And I want to say this to you is that as we go off, if you have these study sheets, keep your scores and keep your scores and everything, and your points, and then you can put all this together and get a certificate at the end. And so keep up with it. And if you don't have any study guides, just email us and we'll get them to you. Thank you very much, and we thank you for being our audience. And you can see this again because it'll be online for. It will remain online for those who want to review it again. Thank you.
I think what most people need to understand is a continuation, because to be able to follow some of it, explain it a lot less. But can you turn it off?